In module 5, we are going to introduce the idea of 5S, and 5S is something which is a very important part of lean. It's one thing that people don't fully understand and sometimes not appreciate, because when you think about 5S, the first thing that comes to mind is housekeeping. And when we think of housekeeping, we think of a broom and cleaning up the place, usually which is done the day before we are going to get a visit from a, let's say the president or some important or some vice president coming to see the place. But that is not what 5S is. So let's take a look at what is 5S. Well, 5S is actually very closely associated with the idea of standardized work, because if you do not have 5S in place, it is very difficult to actually have standard work. Because if you do not have things organized well at the workplace, you will not be able to have repetitive tasks being done in a definable and predictable manner. It is also the first step in developing a basic culture of continual improvement. Because when you talk about continual improvement, you again need to have the place organized in a certain way which does not necessarily change from the morning till the afternoon till the evening, because the place is actually disorganized. So if you have the place organized in a certain manner, you can then try to find ways to improve that if there is a certain system in which that particular place has been organized in the first place. It is also the first step in implementing tools such as just-in-time, total productive maintenance, etc. One of the things that I learned very interestingly is we are doing a consulting project for a company, and they had a visit from one of the Japanese companies who I don't think they were supplying to them as yet, but the first thing that the person saw when he arrived at that particular shop floor, because we had been doing some work, is he could actually see the 5S charts and the 5S work that was being done. And he didn't really care about the technology and all the other buzzwords that were flying around. He wanted to know about the 5S, because according to him, if you are doing the basics correctly, the rest of the things will follow. If you have failed to follow the basics, the rest of the things will not happen. Okay, so it is extremely important for people to ensure that they do take into account the basics, and 5S is part of that foundation. So when we talk about 5S, we say that 5S is really an organized approach to housekeeping which helps improve operations, productivity, morale, and the appearance of the workplace. It is not the cleaning up that we do in preparation for a management visit, which we oftentimes see. We have to understand that 5S is something which is meant for the people who are actually doing the work. It is not for management. Management can appreciate it, management can help encourage it, but the actual benefit of 5S is going to be to the people who are actually doing the job on a day-to-day basis. So, if we were to ask the question, why is housekeeping or 5S important in plants, in warehouses, in homes, in every place? There are several reasons. One is that if we have poor housekeeping, we would find it very difficult to find what we need when we need it. And I'll show you some pictures from an actual project that we worked on. And this was a storage depot. Let me just give you a very brief background. I will not name the company, but this was a company where we were doing this particular project, and they had a number of depots in the country, and I wanted to visit one of the depots. And I said to the management that I would like to visit the depot without any advance notice, because the moment you give an advance notice, what's going to happen? There would have been, a flurry of activity the day before or the morning before the visit, and everything would have been cleaned up. The idea of the visit, of course, it was not to pull people up for not doing the job, but to actually see the ground reality as it is. And this is the actual ground reality. Now, this is a company that makes precision machined parts, and it's an automotive supplier. Now, you can imagine precision machined parts and the way in which they are being stored. Now, if you needed to find a particular part, there are a whole lot of variety in this particular product type. How easy would it be to find the actual part that you needed? I'll let you answer that. Now, as opposed to that, if you had the whole thing organized in a much nicer way, as you see over here, and what you will notice is that there are actual signs up here which indicate, first of all, you notice that things are in very neat piles or stacks. I shouldn't say piles, but they are stacks. Secondly, you will notice that they are on pallets. Why do you need pallets? Why do you not store cartons on floors directly? Well, one of the reasons you don't want to do that, especially in India, is when there is moisture in the floor and cartons can actually get soggy. Some of these cartons could weigh as much as 30, 40, 50 kilos. And when they are that heavy and you start to see that the bottom is getting soggy, the cartons are going to break when you try to open or move them. Okay. The other thing that you'll notice is that there are clear signages which indicate what is over here, as opposed to this case where there is no sign indicating what is in what area. First of all, there is no clear demarcation of the cartons into areas. Second reason is because poor housekeeping leads to lack of first in first out and also excess inventory. In the particular project that I was describing to you, they had about 17 or 18 depots in the country. I didn't visit all of them, but we got data from some of them. I visited about 3 or 4 of the depots, and the data that we got from them was that roughly anywhere from about 15 to 50% in any one depot of the material that was stored was basically slow or non-moving. And it was not that these were products that were not moving, it is that the material that was being stored had been stored there for more than 6 months, 8 months. So you may have had an active part number, but the part for that had been in storage for more than 6 months. The reason for this was that any new material that arrived at the depot got shipped out earlier because the older parts were stored in such locations that they were difficult to access, and the person didn't know exactly where those particular cartons were stored. So with the result that any new material that came in went out first, so there was no first in first out, and in most of these cases there was about 30% of slow moving on an average, 30% extra material which could easily be gotten rid of, and if you got rid of that, you would have created significant excess space. Now, this is just an example to suggest how do you exercise, how do you implement first in first out when you have this kind of a storage. Poor housekeeping can lead to accidents and also to product damage, and examples here, number one, some of these cartons are upwards of 50 kilos in weight, and you see how they are extending out. If they extend a little bit further, it is quite possible that some of these cartons might fall over, especially when they are so heavy. You see some of this packaging material. This is the the metal tape that is used to fasten some of these cartons, and if somebody is walking, one can easily cut oneself with this. You have products that are just lying out in the open, and again these are precision machined parts, which again if the parts were to fall on the floor, it's quite possible that they can get damaged. So both a person as well as the product can be hurt. Now again, these are just used as examples to illustrate the contrast between what could be and what was. So obviously this is a much safer work environment. This is the next reason is that poor housekeeping can lead to errors. A lot of times one has seen that especially where you have two parts that are highly similar to each other, that when a person has to pick a part from the store and deliver it to the line, that the wrong part has been delivered. And one of the reasons may be that we have the two parts basically stored in such a way that the person cannot tell the difference, that there is a overlap between the two parts, that one of the parts is flowing into the other, and so therefore poor housekeeping can often lead to errors because the person cannot tell the difference between different parts. Interestingly, a lot of times people do believe that if you do housekeeping, you will require more space. To the contrary, and we have demonstrated this, we have found that if you do 5S properly, you can actually find better space utilization. When we had walked into this company where we are doing 5S as a project, we walked into the store, and the store had mezzanines on three sides, and there was material just everywhere in that store. And the store manager basically told us, he said, you know, we need more space. What we need is a fourth mezzanine. And what we told that manager, we said, you know what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of these three mezzanines that you have up there. And the person looked at us, you know, dumbfounded. He said, you don't know what you're talking about. And we walked up there and started asking questions. What is this? Why do you need this? When do you use this? Okay. And for most of this, there was no answer. And anything and everything for which there was no answer, we said, out it goes. And when you start to throw things which are not required out of the plant and out of the store, you actually create space for the things that really need to be there. So good housekeeping actually leads to better space utilization. The other thing was, in this depot, what we saw when we had walked in was a situation that looked like this. Okay, and we asked the person, why do you have, you know, things stored up to the top over here, which is very difficult for a person to reach, especially when the weight of some of these cartons is more than 50 kilos. Whereas you have things that are stored down on the floor, in the aisles, and all this packing material. And the answer that we got was, oh, we don't have space if we were to try and only load things up to the shoulder level, because where you have manual handling of cartons, it is a known fact that the ideal height to which the material should be stacked is no higher than the shoulder height of the individual. And because anytime you're going to store it higher than the shoulder height, you require the person to actually exercise much more effort in order to store and retrieve the part, or you have to climb on top of other cartons, which itself can be a safety hazard. So what we did is we basically rolled up our sleeves and said, all right, you cannot store these parts effectively. We will show you how. And in about 2 or 3 hours, we physically moved all of the cartons, and there was nothing that was more than shoulder high, and everything was easily movable. The aisles were narrower, so you had better space utilization, but it was sufficient for a person to walk in and walk out and still be able to move the material relatively easily. And so you did have better space utilization as well as ease of handling. Another reason why poor housekeeping is, housekeeping is important, because poor housekeeping presents a poor image to customers. Have you ever been to a restaurant and asked to see the kitchen? I'm sure that if we were to walk into the kitchen of a number of restaurants, we would not eat there because the kitchens in a lot of these cases are filthy. Similarly, any manufacturing plant, if we were to have the customers walk through our manufacturing plants, the customer would refuse to buy our product simply because of the way in which we keep that particular shop floor. On the other hand, if our shop floor is clean, neat, organized, that itself can be a major selling point. There are a number of restaurants. Perhaps the best example I can think of is a fast food restaurant like McDonald's, which you can actually see in front of you how and the place is where uh, your food is actually being prepared. And if that thing was dirty or filthy, you would not go to a McDonald's to go and eat. But McDonald's does very good business. So do a number of other restaurants, even high-end restaurants, which have a clear access. A lot of pizza kitchens give you clear visibility of the place where the pizza is made. And the idea is that you actually get to see how your food is being prepared. And it gives you more confidence in terms of the cleanliness of the place. This is another one of the depots of that company that we are doing the project for, and this is exactly what the entrance to the depot looked like when we walked in there. Now, if you were a customer, how do you feel about doing business with this company? Okay, doesn't take much just to remove those things, clean up a little bit. Isn't this much better? Now, yes, you could still make things better because there's still a lot of dirt around here. But all I'm saying is, without taking much time and effort, just keeping the place reasonably presentable does a lot of wonders. Finally, good housekeeping improves employee morale and productivity. Nobody likes to come and work in a pigsty. This is what the place looked like before, and this is what the place became after we were done with doing the rearrangement. Now, if you were to watch this morning and evening, which one of these two would you like to work in? Which one of these would you feel, that you would like to come to work every single day? So, we have talked about why 5S is important. Now, we'll talk briefly about what we mean by 5S. Actually, the thing that I should mention is that there is no such thing as 5S, because the way in which people say 5S, it seems like it is one thing. Okay, 5S is not one thing. 5S is 5 different S's, which are 5 principles of housekeeping, and the S's are the 5 Japanese terms. I do not necessarily expect you to remember the Japanese terms, but you should be able to see, and you should be able to remember the English terms, which sometimes people have also they have sometimes reworded to make them also start with S. The 5 S's are Seri, which stands for sorting; Seton, which is arranging; some people say set in place. The third is Siso, which is cleaning, and some people call this shine. The fourth is Shiketsu, which is standardization, and the last one is Shitsuki, which is self-discipline. And we'll be talking about all of these 5 S's in our session number 8, and we will take a look at what each one of these involve.